Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been fairly vocal about the fact that I didn't necessarily think a pre-construction condo was a great investment compared to resale for most people. In the past, they've been amazing investments. People have made a ton of money on buying off the plans. I bought a pre-con in 2018 and I'm very, very happy with my purchase. But as I continue to see the price gap getting bigger and just looking at the numbers as investments, I was like, it doesn't make sense to me, right? There's so much better value in resale. And as I've learned, it doesn't matter what I think because people kept buying pre-construction condos. And as we're going through a time now where the assignment market's a little bit of a scary place and people are going to lose money on properties they bought a few years ago, the question becomes again, is it worth it moving forward? Should you even consider buying a pre-construction condo in 2023? So this video is going to be a little bit different than my normal videos. I'm actually going to show you a full interview I did with Christopher Castellano. So it was myself, Eileen Laswell, who's another top broker in Toronto. She's a friend of mine that was on our podcast as well. And we sit down with the VP of sales for Camross Felcorp. They are a large developer in Toronto and they were launching a brand new project called Raglan House. And they had a professional video team there. And what they were doing that day is they were having a lot of like pre-construction focused agents in doing these videos kind of promoting the project. But Eileen reached out to me and said, hey, they're willing to have us in as agents that for the most part specifically focus on resale and voice our concerns and openly answer our questions. So I said yes. I thought this was really cool that the developer was willing to do this. And there's a few other things you should know as well going into watching this interview. I had no prior relationship with them. They knew exactly that we were coming in and we were going to have concerns about the pre-con industry and what was going on and that they were going to try to change our mind. They paid me absolutely nothing to do this. I just wanted answers. So watch this video and make up your own mind. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I was right. Who knows? But watch this video and see how you feel. I'd love to know in the comments below. As you're watching it, you can pause it. Let me know just like, is this something that you're looking at in the future? Does it still make sense only to buy resale? It's a bit of a long video, so I'll also put timestamps so you can jump around the interview based on the questions that we asked.
Hi, I'm Eileen Laswell, broker at Chestnut Park Real Estate. I'm joined by Tom Story from Royal LePage Signature and Christopher Castellano, VP of Sales and Marketing at Camross Felcorp. Today we're going to talk about a brand new project, the Raglan. And Christopher, we have a few questions for you.
Of course, happy to chat. I know this is going to be a bit of a Mythbuster segment about pre-con and what's happening with it and what's going on. So very happy to bring two of the top resale agents in the city to chat with me today.
Well, thanks for having us. You know, I think for both me and Eileen, as predominantly selling resale, is trying to figure out, okay, for this project specifically, what's different about this project than all the other projects that are sent to us from, you know, other developers?
For sure. I think that's a great question to start off with, Tom. What's really important to remember about any pre-con is you got to look at the fundamentals, the same as you would with any sort of resale project. You want to look at the developer, you want to look at the location, and you want to look at what the offering is to your clients. Developers probably a little bit different. I don't know how far back you guys are going to see the who built the house in the 1950s or whatnot. But in the pre-construction world, because you're buying, you know, as a lot of people in your industry say, off plan, or you're buying sort of a contract, this pie in the sky dream, you want to look at the reputation of the individual or the company you're buying from. So with ourselves, with Camross Felcorp, we have the storied past of being around for 45 years in the GTA. We've delivered some 80 buildings, some 40,000 residences, 2 million square feet of office and retail space. And you know, we've been fortunate enough to win a myriad of awards throughout the years. What's great about Camross Felcorp and what makes us such a desirable developer to partner with when you have one of your clients looking for a pre-con opportunity is that we're one of the few true vertically integrated developers in the GTA. So we handle everything from site acquisition to rezoning to development to marketing and sales, all the way through to the end of construction with CamCorp, our in-house construction team. Now, why this is very important to look for a developer that has a construction team is it ensures that the quality of the product is looked after from start all the way to the end. So it is a Camross employee who is taking that project and that individual suite that one of your buyers has purchased all the way through to the end of production and to the delivery ultimately when you do your PDIs and all that, which is an industry term we can get into a little bit later. I think touching on the other two things we talked about, what's the offering and the location, those are also paramount things to consider. You guys know better than anyone that in real estate, it's all about location, location, location. What we have at Raglan House is an incredible location that is going to be the first development on Raglan Street that's going to revitalize the Bathurst and St. Clair intersection. Now, Bathurst and St. Clair is one of the most important intersections in the city of Toronto, right? You got the subway right there with St. Clair West, you've got a Loblaws, you've got the streetcar loop, you've got all the buses, and we're going to be the first development on Raglan that's going to kick off a $4 billion revitalization of that node. You've got 15 buildings coming up from reputable Toronto builders, and you've got a massive retail intensification coming to that area. So when it comes to the second point of, well, what about the location? I think, well, you two know better than anyone, given the majority of your business is in Midtown. I think you see that Raglan House at the convergence of Forest Hill, Cedarvale, Humewood, and Winchwood plays to that very well. You're close to all the retail amenities, you're close to transit, you're close to these incredible neighborhoods. Lastly, what's the offering that we're given? So with Precon, specifically with Camrost, we ensure that we build excellence in every single one of our projects. And what we're going to be doing at Raglan House is offering very high-end finishes like Miele appliances, Kohler plumbing fixtures, imported Italian kitchens, and we're going to be having some incredible incentives for your clients, we'll get into that a little bit later, to ensure that this is a significant return on investment for them as they're going through this.
I think for me, one of the things I find interesting about Precon and why for many resale agents, I think they don't get into it, is there isn't really a story with some of the buildings that get sold. You know, it's just they happen to have a parking lot that they bought in King West and they've got to put up a building and there's no view, there's no master plan community. And so for me as a resale agent, if I'm going to be recommending a project, I really want there to be a story behind it. Yes. And for me to know that there's some sort of, when you're talking about $4 billion worth of revitalization, that's important to me because whether or not I'm selling resale or pre-con, I want to make sure that they're going to get an investment that's going to appreciate, ideally, at a higher rate than the average of Toronto. And the only way to do that is if there are things that are going to change that community. So whether or not it's the LRT, which obviously we saw a huge bump recently in those areas, whether or not it was Leaside or in Humewood, Cedarvale. And I think we're going to continue to see that in areas where developers are heavily investing and not just one-off buildings.
There's going to be something said too about like being the first,
of course,
going into those areas
right.
where then all the money's going to come. It's better to be in there at the beginning than, you know, at the end, right?
And you know, I think Eileen, you brought up a very interesting point about this idea of finding areas poised for growth. And that's bread and butter to Camrost. So when you look at our track record, right, we were the ones who truthfully kicked off the St. Clair revitalization with the Avenue, then with Imperial Plaza, 99 Fox Bar, 101 St. Clair, the townhomes on Fox Bar Road. We brought over 1,000 units to this node, to the St. Clair node, before really anyone was looking at it. If you look at what we did in Yorkville with the revitalization of the old Four Seasons, if you look out at Park Lawn and Lakeshore and Mimico, this intersection that has now exploded and become this centralized hub that young people, young families, people who are leaving home for the first time want to move into. You know, Camrost started that out with the whole Mystic Point development. We put up a ton of buildings over there. So when you partner with a developer like Camrost, to your point of looking for an area that's poised for growth, you have incredible returns. Tom as well, when we were talking about the whole master planned neighborhood coming into here and being first in it, when you look at nodes like Liberty Village, Regent Park, Yonge and Eglinton, if you look at what's happened to those nodes over the past decade, people who bought right before the explosion or the big intensification have outperformed the market. So had you bought in Yonge and Eglinton about a decade ago, you would have had a 97% return on your purchase price. That's compared to the overall market's 75% return. And when you consider with pre-construction, you're putting 20% down, that's closer to a 500% return on investment. Like, these are very big numbers we're talking about, right? So being first definitely does have an incredible advantage when it comes time to looking at the value of your location into the future. I think you can speak to it incredibly as well, but humans are social creatures. we want to move into areas where other people are. We don't want to be in a tower in the middle of a field, you know, somewhere in the prairies. We want to be at a heavily lived in intersection with a lot of retail and with a lot of people around us.
So one thing that I've always looked at when I've invested in real estate, or my clients have invested in real estate, whether it is resale or pre-construction, is you always look at, okay, well, I'm investing into these areas and you want location and you want all those things to be there. But there's really two things you're focusing on. You're focusing on, does it cash flow or does it appreciate?
Right.
And Toronto's been a market where cash flow hasn't really been a thing unless you're putting down 50%, let's say it,
Fair.
for a while. Looking at this project, I know that you guys have some incentives where you could actually be cash flowing on a new construction in 2023 onwards, which isn't something I really thought I'd say realistically.
For
so
sure.
How is that possible?
It's a great question. So the concept of buying a cash flowing positive asset in Toronto with only putting 20% down really has been a unicorn or a diamond in the rough for, let's say, the past decade, half decade. So what a lot of people focus on when they buy pre-construction is this idea of you're purchasing a discounted asset. If I could come to you today and say, hey, for $500,000, you'll be able to get a $900,000 condo in 25 years. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? You're automatically almost doubling your money. So that's what's been driving the pre-construction market all these years and a lot of real estate investing that's been happening. That doesn't take into account any sort of appreciation in price and raw asset value or appreciation in rents, because if you're looking at it as an investment rather than buying it for yourself or to downsize or for your children, you're going to rent it out. You want some cash flow. To help supplement that and to add a level of certainty for our buyers, what Camros is going to be offering for your clients at Raglan House is a $3,000 a month top-up to really bring them to a cash flow positive position. The idea with this is when you look at when this project is going to launch, when people will buy, and when the project is going to close, we said, you know what, where we sit today in 2023, and we look at the year 2030, which is when these programs will run until, do we feel in a decade the market will be higher than where it is today? I think most of us around the table will say yes. When we ask about rents, how are rents going to be in the city of Toronto in a decade? They've just been double-digit increasing almost month over month for the past year. Do we feel rents will be higher in a decade in Toronto? I think the answer is yes. Then the last one is interest rates. Do we feel that interest rates will be lower or higher than they are today in a decade? Based on, number one, just the cyclical nature of the economy, and secondly, based on all the rhetoric coming out of the Bank of Canada, as well as our neighbors to the south, more probable than not, rates will be lower, right? So you're going to have an asset that'll increase in a decade, you're going to have an asset that'll command higher rents in a decade, and you're going to be in a more advantageous position when it comes to rates. So that's really the certainty that we're looking to offer with Raglan House to your pre-construction buyers.
So I think that's really important for me to understand. The numbers were always where it fell down when I was comparing pre-con with, resale.
Right.
And so being able to say to someone, okay, you know what? We're going to have a top up, so this is what it's going to look like. You're going to be cash flow positive right off the bat. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge story. I think the other myth or the other challenge we have as resale agents is the transparency in closing costs. We find it really challenging to understand. You've got a 40-page document, you've got some builder caps, you've got the hydro connections, all of these little things, and some things are $50, but some things are thousands. And the developer fees are capped, but what about all those other things that can add up? And so we've kind of shied away from it, at least I have, because I can see myself as a consultant to my clients, and I want to be able to really tell them what to expect. For sure. But, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing to sort of help not just buyers, but us resale agents?
Yes, for sure. So closing costs, I think, are something I don't think they are. They're something that exists in any pre-construction deal. Typically, most of them are just, city taxes and city fees that have to get passed on to the purchasers. I think, Eileen, we've gone through a couple of deals where we used to sit down and calculate every $20 fee that's coming and whatnot. But what we're doing to help with all this for your clients is we're going to be offering zero closing costs. So we're just going to take care of that. from as an incentive standpoint. Like we were talking about earlier, we're looking to really get a certain number of units sold. We're looking to sell 100 units so we can get the shovel in the ground and start construction on this. So we're going to be heavily incentivizing those and making the purchasers, giving them the certainty that they know what's going to be happening with these deals into the future. When it comes to closing costs, really it's all the stuff that you find deep within the deal. So we're just going to make it super easy. We're going to take care of it and move the purchasers on so they can enjoy their new residence.
So Christopher, for those who really believe in real estate as an asset class, can you really walk us through how the deposits for pre-con can really work as leverage vehicles and how your money really grows differently than if you were to buy something resale and having to close sort of 3 months from now?
Our 20% down payment that we require is spread out over a number of years. Rather, when you go resale, you've got to put up the 20% right away, plus the closing costs, plus the land transfer costs, plus your inspection, plus. Whereas with pre-construction, it's 20% over 3, 4, 5 years. And then you're taking your asset in 5 years. You have the advantage of being able to put the deposit down over a much longer time. So it adds a lot of peace of mind to people who are worried or are considering, how do I get into this market today that is consistently rising and is very dynamic? Pre-construction is a great avenue for them to enter and not have to cough up that huge amount of cash today.
So I've got a question about pricing, because it seems like in the pre-construction world, you go back to the condo boom, early 2000s, pre-construction was less expensive. Then by 2010, maybe on par with resale. 2015, it's kind of gone the other direction. And there's now obviously a gap, and you talked about the city development fees, so I understand how it works. I get why the pricing is what it is, because a certain percentage of what you're making is going straight back to the city anyways. But for a consumer looking at this project or looking at something else that already exists, do we know, what's the gap right now between what they could buy today or what they could buy? And again, you're buying future value with new construction. Is that gap as high as it's been previously? Is it getting closer? What's happening with the price gap?
So that's a fantastic question, and it's a very complex question. When we look historically, we do see that there has been a price gap that has grown between resale and pre-construction. That being said, what we've seen over the little bit with this market is that price gap in this class and in this node has actually started to shrink. When we look at resale that's been happening in Imperial Village, I know, Eileen, you've done a bunch of resale there. I think that number is actually getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, I think in resale right now in a similar area, we're looking at anywhere from sort of $1,500 a square foot to up to $1,900. And so when we're looking at Camrost's project and the one at Raglan here, I think what you're offering is a higher luxury, offering. And so it's competing very well with the resale market, and you don't have to close for a few more years.
I think when you look at some of the other pre-construction projects in this area, you see that they're up at that $1,800, $1,750, $1,850 price range, which is where the market should have been a year ago with interest rates where they were. However, knowing that we want to come out, knowing that we want to move the 100 deals, get the shovel in the ground, as I always say, we're going to be offering incentives to bring that price really close. It's going to be a small gap to resale. So people are going to be able to look at it, look at comparable resale, and see that this is something that they'll have to take delivery on in a couple of years. So it really becomes an incredible opportunity for them to get into the market.
So I've got one final question, and this is not just a you-specific question, okay? Why in Ontario, when you buy a new construction, there is interim occupancy and you have to pay that fee back to the developer for the period of time? Why isn't it that a pre-construction condo, you buy it, and when the building is actually done and all the units are done and the amenities done, then you get it and you move in and it just closes? Why is it in Ontario that you have to pay that fee for that period of time?
That's a fantastic question. So there are some developers that opt not to do an interim occupancy, right? You purchase the condo, and the next time you talk to them in a financial sense is when you do final close. The reality is those developers take that fee and they build it into the price. So those buildings will trade at a higher per square foot. The way Camrost approaches that, specifically Interim Occupancy, is we open it up. We want you to move into the building. We want you to get acclimatized to the building. And we offer purchasers the ability to rent out during the interim occupancy. Now, the fee specifically for interim occupancy, there's a lot of misinformation about it. A lot of people think that that's the developer setting the fee and we take the money and we put it in our mattress. That's not actually the case. The fee is set based on the unit you bought, what the maintenance fees are on it, and a prescribed government interest rate. And that money doesn't actually flow to us. It flows basically directly back to the bank to help pay off the loan. So it's not actually the developer that sets the interim occupancy fee. It's essentially a government set calculation.
For a long time, you could buy pre-construction, and in 4 or 5 years when it was done, you could assign your unit on closing, and you could, really make a good amount of money. Anyone that bought pre-con 4 years ago isn't in that position right now. Like, let's be realistic about it. Is that, and for people buying pre-con, you should never really go in with the mindset of that you are going to flip it on closing, right? It should be that you want to close on it. That's the way you look at it. Because also now in Canada with the anti-speculation, the flipping tax, if you make that money, you're paying a percentage on it. Just kind of thoughts on that assignment segment of the market. Is that something that we're encouraging people to do, or you buy this property to close on it and then figure it out?
I think that's a really good question. I do disagree with some of the stuff you said. I think when you look at people who bought 4 years ago and they're looking to assign today for whatever the reason, they're still doing well. It comes down to the fundamentals of, did they buy pre-construction that was overpriced at the time? Did they buy in a location that was suboptimal? There's a lot that goes into play there. With regards to should an individual buy with the idea that they absolutely have to close, I'm not sure. That's up to the individual to decide. At the end of the day, they know their finances better than anyone. They know what their goals are better than anyone. And with the whole speculation tax and the assignment tax that you talked about, really, that's something that's always existed. All that's happened is the government has now made sort of a decree on it and said, now you will have to pay HST. The way it works in Canada, in Toronto and Ontario specifically, is any new construction, there is an HST to be paid on the total price. What's happened now is the government has said if you assign that unit before you take it, before you move into it, before you close on it, you will now have to pay the incremental increase on the HST. Really, that was always the case. Right. Truthfully, you were supposed to, once you bought an assignment or once you made an assignment, you were supposed to call up the government and say, hey, listen, this is what happened, and remit the HST. Now they're just actually going to police it, and now they've put resources behind looking after it. So, if that's something your client wants to stay away from, just close on the unit and then sell it as a primary residence or sell it as an investment residence. Then you don't have to worry about that HST consideration at the end of the day.
And I think it's up to us also as realtors to be able to advise our clients, right? Yeah. Like, we have to be able to run the numbers and say, look, this area is prime for a big bump up because of X, Y, and Z, or it's not, or it's it's historically areas like this have risen greater than central Toronto, other areas. Right. So I think part of that is on us as well, and educating our clients. I certainly know that I have clients that want to close on this and will actually be looking at this as an investment, and the incentives are really attractive. I think, I want to thank you for your time, Christopher. This has been really, enlightening from the resale perspective and trying to bust some myths and help us along the way. And I think this will be really helpful from a resale perspective so that we can get a better understanding of how we can guide our clients through the pre-con process at the Raglan project. So
amazing.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. My name is Tom Story, and remember, home is where your story begins.